Hey, Mona, thanks so much for joining me on a well designed business today.
Hi, Luann. Thank you for having me.
This is sort of crazy because the first time I met you, you were a student at New York School of Interior Design. I met you through a Zoom that my friend Shannon Letty, who's a professor there, was your professor. And Shannon invited me to come to your class virtually and speak with you guys. And then that was like right before Luann Live virtual. And I was like, all of you should come to Luann Live. We'll give all the students a ticket. And so, but the thing was, you came, and a lot of your colleagues did as well, your fellow students. And I remember you speaking on the Zoom when I was like with all the Zoom cameras behind me, the TVs behind me. And after Luann Live, I must have gotten DMs, text messages, and emails. And they were like, get Mona on the show. I want to learn more about
I
her.
feel so privileged to be asked. Thank you.
uh, well, I'll tell you what, it's like we asked you right away. And this is like 2 years later for crying out loud. But I'm not even going to ask how that happened because I'm just happy that you're here finally. And I also know that everything happens when it's supposed to happen. So, I'm just excited. And shout out to Shannon Letty and to New York School of Interior Design. Um, Here's the thing. So I knew a little bit about you and I knew about the design, the type of design that you do, which is to specialize in affordable housing, which we're going to get to. And that was one of the big reasons why people were saying have Mona on. Not only were they attracted to your just your kindness comes through when you speak, and I know that they were attracted to your person, but we have not had the discussion about affordable housing design on the show, and they were like, I want to learn more about that. So you did your intake form, and then I learned something else about you that I didn't know, and that was that you spent 8 months homeless as a teenager. And I thought, holy crow. Like, you don't run into that a whole lot.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? When you're talking like about a podcast about interior
Yes.
design, I'm just going to say, right? So tell me about that, Mona. What was that and what was the impact?
It's
Talk to
such
me
a
a little
long
bit about
time
it.
ago now, but I feel like it it had such an impact to me that, when certain things happen to you, sometimes you run from it. And I think I ran from it for a long time. Everyone always asked me, why do you have so many degrees? And I think because I felt like I didn't get enough education when I was younger, and that chip on your shoulder of not ever feeling full. It's always there, and I think it attributes to
Mm.
that time in my life. I was a little after 16, maybe, and I had to leave home. And back then, there's no cell phones, there's no anything, and I became homeless. And I don't know if I understood what being homeless was back then either, because I was so young. But I started sleeping on the streets, and it was in Hollywood. I think the first night I slept was very close to Griffith Park. And I was pretty much sleeping on the streets for about 2 weeks, and I got really hungry one day and I had no more money left. And I walked to a restaurant that was a Thai restaurant, my mom's Thai. And I was looking for my mom like that whole time. I didn't know how to reach her. My mom had moved to Oregon, and at the time, she hasn't settled. So there's no cell phones, there's no social media, there's no internet. So I couldn't find her. You'd have to go to the old Yellow Pages book. And how do you get to an Oregon Yellow Pages book, and which city in Oregon, which seemed huge. I'm
Yeah,
in
and you're
LA.
in
Yeah.
LA.
So I went to a restaurant, and a young woman, a woman who was working there, she has a daughter a few years younger than me, and she came out and she says, "Is your name Mona?" And I was like, "Yes." And she said, "My mom knows your mom." And I was like so shocked. My mom used to own a restaurant, and her mother, I know her
I have
mother had,
goosebumps all over my body.
I
I did not
know.
know this before we went on
And my
air. Oh
mom,
my God.
she had worked for my mother when my mom owned a restaurant a long time before that. And she was like, come in, I'll feed you. And she fed me a big meal, and I just kept crying because I didn't know who to ask for help from. And I ended up sleeping at the floor of her kitchen. And a few other couches when they needed some space for the next 8 months. And I called every single restaurant in Oregon because I knew that she was in Oregon, but I called every Thai restaurant. thinking my mother must be at a Thai restaurant working. And eventually I called the place and they said, we don't have anyone by your mom's name, but I have a guest who sounds like she might be your mother. She comes to eat here once in a while and she tells me about her daughter and I think her name is Mona. And yeah, so
My God, you can't
no, and
make
then a
this
few
up,
months,
Mona.
maybe a few weeks later, the phone rang at the house. I picked up and it was my mom. And that's how I end up reuniting with my mother. It was,
I, I I'm flabbergasted. Like you saved the best for the show. I mean, part of me is like, thank you.
it was
Holy
hard.
cannoli. That's insane. I mean, you're not in like a small town in middle America where there's one Thai restaurant and 2,000 people. You're in Los Angeles. You're in Hollywood. Like I'm hearing Pretty Woman.
Yeah.
This is Hollywood. Like I'm hearing like there must be a
Yeah.
hundred Thai restaurants. Like that is beyond my comprehension. That is
And
just nuts.
I feel
That
like
is
the
just
craziest
nuts.
part was when I did reunite with my mom. My mom has always had a hard time with what's been happening with our family, the loss of wealth, the loss of work. She lost her business, um, and my mom couldn't handle the stress. And so when I finally got
Mm.
together with my mom, I really thought, oh, I can go back to school now. Get it re-enrolled. I can be a kid
I
again.
could be a
Yeah,
kid.
exactly.
She's going to take
But
care of me.
she was not okay. And because of that, it ended up that I ended up becoming my mom's caretaker. And I ended up staying home. I worked full time and I never went back to school. And my trips took me more, my opportunities took me many more places, but I ended up traveling for a
Oh
bit,
my
taking on
gosh.
jobs. But I was 26 when I decided that I needed some form of education to to grow up.
Oh my goodness. That's amazing. I mean, it sounds like when I hear it, it's almost like, well, would she have left if she could take care of you? Right. Like, I don't know all that details, but it's almost like, well, of course. Right. And so, you know, ugh, gosh, that's crazy. And there's another, just a weird technical question in there. Like when you just stopped going to high school, nobody came looking for
I
you. Like
don't
that's just
know.
it. One
It
less
was
kid,
like I was at
whatever.
a
I
magnet
mean,
school and I was in the first semester of the 10th grade and that's when I left. And I don't know, it was in Van Nuys and I
and
that's it. Yeah.
that's it.
A
Later, I'm
few
out.
people I've met up with over the years who had somewhat knew me back then, they were all very shocked about what happened to me. They didn't know. Apparently, I was just gone.
You were just gone. It never occurred to them that
I
you
was
were
just gone.
homeless. They just figured maybe whatever. They just didn't finish the sentence for themselves. Holy crow. I mean,
Oh no,
that's
I think
insane. That's an
we
insane
Mhm,
story. So here's the thing. So you are,
mhm.
sophomore in high school, you leave, no more education, and you go through this journey and you find your mom and now you're caretaking for her. And it sounds like you've got different types of work and jobs that are sometimes stationary, sometimes traveling. And at 26, you're like, I got to do geometry. Like I got to get a high
It
school
it was
education.
when I was like 20, I was waiting tables at a restaurant. Oh, 19, and I was waiting tables and a man came in and he said, he came with his family and he looked like a really nice guy and he said, you're kind of pretty, if you came to Thailand, you might be able to like be an actress. And the crazy part is back then it was just becoming acceptable for half Thais can be in the industry as a performer because back then there wasn't any. It was a very homogenous society. And I went back. I saved all the money. I told my mom, here's $200. I paid the rent. If I'm not famous in 2 weeks, I'll be back. And I didn't know. All I wanted was to be rich. All I wanted. I didn't know what it meant to do what I was going to do. So I save all my money and I go to Thailand. And I sit in this guy's office waiting for him for like 5 hours. And when he finally came out, he says, "Who are you?" And I was like, "I'm that waitress, you know?"
Oh,
And it took a little convincing that I had really made an effort to get here and I wasn't crazy. And he called his wife, who was a casting director. And like less than a week later, I was on a TV soap opera. And so
oh my God.
that path took me away from school for a little bit longer. I know it's kind of a,
You can't make this up. I had no idea this was going in this
yeah.
direction. I think we need wine for this interview, Mona. I totally
It
think we
was
need
a
wine for
crazy
this.
time. Like when I think about it now, I don't think about me. I feel like I'm watching a movie to myself. Yeah,
Right. It's like this other person, right?
absolutely.
And so how long do
6
you
years.
stay? Like so it's not a Spanish
Yeah.
novella. It's not a telenovela. What
It's
is it
like a
over there in
Spanish novella. It's
Thailand?
totally like it. But
Right,
back then
right.
there's no
Like
internet, right? So if yeah,
Days
yeah,
of Our
but
Lives
they
in
end
Thailand.
like 3 months and they finish 3 months. So they're like episodic and they end. So I was on a show and
Okay.
I had acted for about 3, 4 years and I got a job one day to be a translator on an American movie. And it was called Bloodsport 2. Bloodsport 1 was with Van Damme. Bloodsport 2 was with a different actor.
Wow.
And it was shot in Thailand and they needed someone who'd be a translator. And I didn't know anything more than at this point, no one knows I didn't go to high school. No one knows my history. No one can't search about me. They don't know anything about me, but I can speak English. Yeah. Right.
You're
Yes.
Queen of Sheba for all they
So,
know. Whatever. I'm a I'm an
right.
actress by via
Right.
Hollywood
And
to
then I was
Thailand.
high on this like all I was just doing is sending money home and hoping that things are going to get better. And I ended up translating on this film set and fell in love with the job. Not with the acting. I hated the acting, but I loved coordinating and working with film. So through that experience, I met more filmmakers and not actor side, but people who really studied abroad. Yes,
Production
and
side.
I became really good
Yeah.
friends with a few people, and they started talking about, Steven Spielberg and Alfred Hitchcock and Stanley Kubrick. And I'm like, who are these people? And I realized I have no education. I didn't learn
Oh,
anything the
whoa.
right way. I just know that if you tell me I'm
You're
scrappy.
just
You tell me
scrappy.
you've got 50 people coming to lunch and I need to figure out how to feed these 50 people. I can do it. I can do it without a degree. I can do
I get
anything.
it done.
So I can do it. So I had climbed this ladder and with no net at the bottom. And at 26, I was
Right.
just sitting around. I had just turned 26, and I said, I can't go through life feeling like a fraud, where I have to pretend that
Yeah.
I come from a good family and things were good in my life. I needed to actually build something for myself. And so I went to Torrance Hamilton
Wow.
Adult School when I was 26 and got my GED.
That's incredible. I mean, it's so funny because, my God, first of all, my brain is going to 16,000 directions. Okay. But when I think about that moment, here you are, you're doing work, you're respected by multiple professionals at this level. And it's the weird little conversations that are like, wait, what? And it's like, even if if somebody's going to say to me, oh, well, like that dissertation that Tolstoy did. Like, I don't have any idea, but I'm like, okay, he's a Russian guy. Like, I know who he is. He was popular. He wrote a lot of stuff. He's a philosopher. Like, I have some bearing on it. And it's because probably somewhere in high school, there was something I didn't quite pay all the way attention to, but I got enough to stand there and have a halfway conversation about it. And you don't think about missing that slice, right? Like not having like been made to read Gatsby or
Absolutely.
Catcher in the Rye or, you know, or even just sitting around and watching Jaws and knowing that's Spielberg, like you didn't spend your high school years, going out with friends and going to movies. You were trying
Right.
to survive. Like it's funny how that is a very, um, like I can cognitively see how you don't need it, obviously, to be successful, but that comfort level of what is everybody talking about? It's kind of like when people are all talking about finance around me. I'm like, whatever. Okay. Like, we're just going to make money and then we're going to like put it in the bank and we're going to figure it out and we're going to make sure there's enough at the end. Right. Like, let's be real.
Absolutely. And I think that when I came back to school, I was like, from getting the GED, I got to El Camino College. And at El Camino, you have to pass, even with the GED, you have to do like a math exam and an English exam. And I was 2 levels below average levels for, I have a master's in writing now. So it's kind of like such a far path, right? But like at that time, it was like, oh God, I couldn't think, I couldn't do. I didn't, you don't learn about US history till the 11th grade in high school back then. So I didn't know what an
Right. Right.
electoral
That's what I'm
college is.
saying.
Yeah,
These little
I didn't know.
conversations.
I
Yeah.
didn't know any of this. I felt like I was just a really ill-informed human and who was really scrappy
That's
and
crazy.
knew how to work. Knew that if someone said to me, "This is the menu you're to memorize," you can memorize it, even if I didn't know what
Mm.
the food really is, or I didn't know what the difference of these cheeses are. I just
Yes.
have to know what it might be to someone else who eats it.
Right, right. What it looks like, how much it costs, and if you
Exactly.
want it or not, right? It's like what's interesting is when you first said in the beginning, and I wrote it down, went after so many degrees to fill the void of not completing high school. You know, it's funny because I heard one thing in my head, and through this next part of this conversation, I've learned the actual of it because I did not go to college. And, I was super smart in school, like ridiculous. Honor society, Spanish honor society. There's no reason I shouldn't have been in college, but I couldn't hack it. The school I went to was, first of all, I'm very like, if I write it, I've learned it. Like people say to me all the time, like, how do you remember things on the podcast? I'm like, well, because I'm literally 110% here speaking with you and I'm writing the whole time you're talking. So for me, that's it. It's a done deal. I got this. Right. But the thing was that when I went to go to college, well, they're not going to feed it all to you week by week. They're going to say, I'll talk about this conversation. You go read 5 chapters. And I was like, no, you kind of talk it to me. And that's how I get it. That's how I learn. You talk it to me and I get it. And so I wasn't able to hack it in college when I was young, before I had this understanding of what my gap was. Now I could do it. And I ended up doing it for a time when I was an adult. And I was like, oh, you actually can do this. You don't need to do it. And then it was like, okay. But the thing is, I think I've often not really understood the value of even just that level of high school where, you know what, I might not be able to sit there and do a speech on the electoral college, but I know what it is, right? It's like that's a huge gap. And it's no wonder you have sought to be
Yeah.
so educated now, right? It's like an
Yes.
overcorrection, but then also probably, it's funny because you just nodded to overcorrection, right? But also probably you're a great student. You're a smart lady. You probably would have enjoyed it if you had been able to be in high
I would have
school. How
loved
about
it.
that,
I love
right?
school. And I still do,
Yeah,
which is kind of why, and I'm probably the only sibling who went to college fully and stayed in college. But my not everyone likes school, and it's okay. There are so many
right.
paths. Yeah,
Like I couldn't
there's
wait
so
to
many
get
paths.
out. I was like,
My
let me
sister
get
made
out, get out,
more
let me
money
start
than
my
I
life.
do, and she never went a day in college. Well, she did a few days, but she didn't like college at all. She just didn't. But she is so amazing and so smart, whip smart. She's street smart. I mean, like I survived in the street, I think, because I was
Yeah.
earnestly afraid of everything, and I never, did anything because out of fear. I was one of those who
Ah,
were like, oh,
ah.
this is really scary. And I befriended every
Oh,
person on the street. I have to walk from one street to another area to go to work, and I knew every prostitute, drug dealer, and a weapons dealer along the way, and they
wow.
all liked me because I was a 16-year-old kid who would bring leftover foods from the restaurant and feed everyone along the way. And
Oh, oh
because I
my
just I didn't
goodness.
see evil the way I just saw up like people with or without opportunities. And and I was one of the ones
Yeah.
without. And I
Interesting.
didn't see the world the same way, I
Yeah.
guess. But if you put me on the street right now, I would die. I don't think I survive it. There's no way. I'd be dead. It's so hard out.
I highly doubt that. You probably organize the street. Like, let's go. We can do better than this, people. I know
You might be
this.
right.
You go get this. You go get that. I'll start this. Blah blah blah. At the end of the day, we've got to figure it
Absolutely true.
out.
Oh man, so
Yeah. You know what's interesting? The other thing that occurred to me when you mentioned the gentleman in the restaurant that was like, "Oh, you pretty. Like you're pretty. You could be in the movies." Like I went
right.
immediately
And
to
he
sex
came with his wife
trafficking.
and kids. And so I had this thing. Right, right.
But that doesn't
And
always
you would have
matter.
never
Like,
known.
no, no. Like, because there's
Absolutely.
men that just rule the world and rule the world that they live in, and other people just watch them
Yep.
do it, even though they
And
don't like it, right?
he is
Like that
like
kind of
the
power
one
guy,
of the
right?
most famous film producer, television producer in Thailand to this day. He's probably one of the most famous.
Wow.
Um, and he runs Kantana Studio, and his name is Charik, Gancharik, and he's just amazing. He genuinely said, "Well, you're kind of pretty," and I was really young, but they now have a school for acting that his family has started up. So they were really, and I
Oh,
didn't know, but
yeah.
one of the other waiters said he's really famous, Mona. If he said this, it might be real. So it wasn't like I knew any better. I just thought that I had nothing to lose.
Right. Well, and I just
Right.
really thank the universe because I got to tell you, all of that could have been true. He could have been everything he was. The other guy could have, said, "Hey, he's famous. It's probably true." But I mean, I
Where
really
is
was
this
like,
going? Yeah.
"Whoa, like, what are you going
It
to tell
turned
me
out really
next?"
good.
I know. And then I had to escape, and you know what? I know we're both laughing at it, but God help us for the poor, women like and children that are pulled into sex. Like it's
Yeah,
nuts. It's a thing.
absolutely.
It's a thing, right? Oh, it's crazy. It's crazy. Oh my gosh. I was like, okay, just keep peeling back this onion. Why don't you? Okay. So here we are. Like all of that
Yeah.
impacts where you are now. So, multiple
I
degrees.
worked in film for a long
um,
time. And then in 2016, I started like not wanting to be in film as much anymore. I felt like there is a distance from what I was designing for a movie set to the user or whoever. Like, I never know who gets to see this thing. And does it really even matter? I
mm,
started doubting everything I did. And what I really wanted to do was I wanted to impact the user. I wanted to design in a way that it helps lives. And I didn't know what that meant. I just knew that I was,
mm,
making independent films left and right wasn't changing my life or changing anyone's life who's watching it. How do I get to a place where I could do something and impact someone and have a direct impact? And I was talking to my husband a lot at the time. I finally met a really good man and married him, all that. We'll skip all that, but he's a really
oh,
good guy. And he
that's
said
awesome.
like, you love design. You've always been designing movie sets and, why don't you look into interior design? And it just seemed so daunting to me. Like I wasn't trained as an
Mm,
artist. I wasn't, I became a set designer by building movie sets. I went through the carpentry route. So there was this fear of mine that, oh no, I'm going to go back to school. I'm going to be the dumbest person in the class and I'm not going to know anything. And I don't
mm,
use software very well. I didn't grow up with a computer and all these things. And he said, all it sounds like are just a bunch of reasons for you to overcome, instead of reasons for you to be running the other way. So,
not do it. Oh
yeah.
my goodness.
Yeah.
Well, he knows you and he sleeps
Um,
with one eye open too. I'm going to tell you
and
right
so I
now.
moved to New York, went to NYSID, and my whole life changed. Yeah.
Wow. Wow. And so the two of
Yes.
you moved to
Yes.
New York
Hmm.
together and you
Yeah.
did it to go to NICET. It wasn't like, oh, whoa.
Yeah.
That's some devotion to you and to what he
Yeah.
had a
And I
belief in
wanted to
you.
go to one of the oldest cities
Wow.
in the United States where it's the birth of interior design. I wanted to learn about the history. And there were so many options. I could have probably gone to a lot of other schools because I had a bachelor's, but I
Sure.
chose NYSID specifically because I went through every single curriculum and I compared them. And I felt like NYSID had the most robust curriculum at the time for me to get out and start working. And that's what I wanted. I wanted to just go
Mm.
to school. And at that point, I had a master's already too from a different field in film. And so I thought at that point, I have a master's from UCLA and an undergrad from Loyola Marymount, LMU, and they're both famous film schools. And I had this
Oh my
pedigree
God.
that was great, right? And then I got to NICET and they rejected my portfolio. They're like, you can't use it because it's not a one person portfolio. It's a movie, right? I need like 40 people to make the scenes happen. so, so I ended up going back to the
Oh,
rudimentary, going back to the basics, started hand sketching, creating, and had to find the will to be me, to be a beginner again. And at the time I was already in my 40s, so it was pretty crazy. It was a
wow.
crazy ride.
That is crazy. That is
Changed my whole life
absolutely
though. I mean,
insane.
the things I learned every
Yeah,
single class.
right?
I think I
Right?
remember being in Shannon's class. She's one of my early studios, and Shannon was like, today you're presenting, so no ums, no uhs, no things that are not even related to my project. But she was so strict about presentation. She
She's
is
so
an amazing
dedicated.
teacher.
I mean, come on. Isn't she like one of the most
Amazing.
amazing humans
Yes.
you've ever met? And then add her dedication as a
And
teacher.
you know,
It's
when you look
insane,
at it, it's all
right?
the things in between the lines that she was trying to teach that made,
Yes.
help. And I had, Ellen Fisher, who's the dean of the school, and she was such a champion for
Ah,
me. And so was my teacher, Barbara. And I definitely feel that all my peers, I mean, I was around some really talented people, and I remember thinking when COVID hit, like, really? Like, I'm graduating and this is it. I did all that to not know what's going to happen with my life. And I went back to school thinking I
yeah.
was going to start a firm. That there was no thought of being an employee. I was older.
Mm.
This was going to pivot and change, and I was going to own my own design firm, and I was going to find a niche that overlaps film and television and interiors. I had all these dreams, and then COVID hit, and then yeah,
Movies are closed down,
I
all the
was employed the
things.
entire time, which was so amazing, and most people weren't, and I helped a lot of people who were not.
Yeah.
Um, but I ended up getting this job offer in San Francisco, and I was like, why not? I was interning in healthcare at the time at Perkins Eastman, and I loved my job. I loved healthcare, but it was just a hard time to stay employed in a big firm when they were laying so many people off. And so I went to a smaller firm,
Mhm.
and they YA studio in San Francisco, and Yaku Askew and Martin Paquin
Mm.
are the owners. And Yaku Askew, YA, he had known my husband back since when my husband was still a student. So he was gracious enough to say that, why don't you both come? He had no idea what I could offer at the time. And Martine has like a sister
Wow.
company, and Martine does the all the interior design. So I kind of fell into step with working with both of them. And it's almost 4 years now that I've been there, and I spend 90% of my time on the affordable housing side, and I love it. And I'm finally seeing the two buildings I worked on from day one getting built. I'm in CA right now, and in a very short time, when this building gets built, I have to sit and think about all those dreams I had when I switched my career, and if I was ready to just do it. Because a year ago, I started taking small projects, and I thought maybe in a year and a half, I'll be there.
Mm. So, all right. Now, first of all, I just want to go back and do it a little bit more love on NICET because I agree. And I mean, Ellen and Shannon and all the people there are so amazing. And I have collaborated with them a lot of times, like visiting the different classes virtually and in real life and stuff. And I can hear in you, the extra that you got there, right? You got the education, but you got that extra. And I just wanted to take 2 seconds to acknowledge that. But now you move on and it's COVID, and the two of you get this opportunity to go back to the West Coast. And your husband's just like, is he just the greatest guy on the planet? And he's like, hey, whatever you need, Mona, like, let's just do
I
it.
I got lucky there. That was my mom says that's my
That's
lottery in
awesome.
life. She said, of all the things that have could
Oh,
have gone that might have been very challenging, I've landed one of the kindest human who is just super supportive. And I don't know, I think that he sees what I want to give back to the world maybe, or he encourages
mm,
it too, and he
hmm,
always tells me to not be afraid, and I got really lucky in
mm.
that sense.
Well, and the thing about it is that that many who had the path that you had, it's so much more common that it's a series of really bad relationships
Yeah.
along the way, because it's that lack of what the circumstances that you were in can create that lack of worth and that lack of esteem, and so therefore you don't value yourself, and then therefore you don't come to a relationship where you expect to be valued. And guess what, when we don't come to a relationship expecting to be valued, we're not. And so I think it just also really speaks to probably what it was at Luann Live virtually, that people just were attracted to you. Like, there is this part of you that, regardless of all of the crazy, good, bad, and ugly that's happened, that you are a very centered person. Like, you have this inner core of who you are that comes out.
Oh, thank you.
I don't know. It
I have a
just
lot
is
of
interesting.
optimism. I broke both my wrists
Yeah.
in December, and I'm now in a brace, and it's going to be off in a couple weeks. And
Yeah.
the other hand is pretty much okay. This one, only the thumb broke, so um,
How
roller
did you do
skating.
that, you nut? Oh my God.
Don't go roller skating. It's so risky.
With
Yeah.
a lollipop in your mouth, probably, right? Like, and a balloon in the other hand.
I
This is what I do.
I
You're
should
not a
not have
nut.
gone, but it's okay. I was trying to participate. It was my sister's birthday. I was coming off the rink. I had skated successfully for an hour and 45 minutes before I fell.
That
But
is
that
so, oh my, that had to
it
be
was
really
it
like,
was
you've got to be
hard, but
kidding
it
me.
also, I think, like, really made me slow down in a way and think, and I've been able to work.
How did you do
Oh,
your
left-handed.
design work
I have
without
been
your hands?
left-handed for the last 6 weeks. So yeah, it was winter break, so that
Oh
was
my
kind of helpful.
God.
And I don't know.
Okay.
I lost track also of why I said that, but I was just you said something being centered.
Well, I cut you off because I just was like, wait a minute, how did you work? But you were saying how it created space for you to
Yeah.
slow down and
And to
to,
just think, I'm
you
studying
know,
for my AREs because I've always had this dream. I wanted to be an interior and an architect. I just wanted to do both. I wanted to build a house and decorate the house. I wanted to do everything. Right.
brain surgeon is
So,
next,
so I've
you
been
know.
collecting my hours since I was at NYSID because that was another thing. There were a lot of people at NYSID who were dual degrees and who were both architect and interior. And I thought, like, there's just a total path for this. We can be both. There's no reason architects want to study
Wow.
interiors. So I've been collecting my hours, and I had studied so hard before I broke my both my wrists that I was like, I'm just gonna go take the exam. I already scheduled it both in December, and I was like, I'm just gonna take the exam, whatever. I mean, I have 3 fingers. It's just click, right? It's like ABCs. I can read. I should be okay. And I passed both of my first 2 exams. And everyone is shocked. And I said, I didn't study a day after I fell because I had nothing in me to study. But it's all up here. And my
Right.
interior design education, I studied and I've taken all my certifications and NCIDQ. And there's so much overlap that I just kind of walked in there and was able to do it.
Well, you see, that is because along the way, you were actually learning the things as opposed to being there to just get the
Yeah.
degree or to get the grade and get out of
Yeah.
that class. There's a difference. Believe me, I know the difference. I've done both. Right. And, because I think of you coming to it as an adult, right? Like, that's like what I was sharing with you before. It's like, I finally did go back to college in my, like, I don't know, maybe 31, 30, whatever. And for me, it was enough to
Yes,
prove that I could do it. I was like, oh, okay. So I just did this for 2 years, took one or two classes a semester while having the kids and the business and everything. And I got an A in every class. So it didn't tap into me. Okay. I need to finish this. It just said to me, okay, you could do it. You don't need to
absolutely.
prove it to yourself. But when you are enjoying it the way you have and the way you have gone from one area of education to another, it's what I'm hearing is you've actually learned it along the way,
And
not
I
just
love it.
completed it.
The
Yeah.
minute I recently
Yeah.
started teaching at UNLV, and it's an in-person school. Now, I've taught at NYSID. I've gone back to teach online classes because they're in New York, and
I love
I
it.
just love Ellen so much and the program so much. And
I
I finally
know.
did this, UNLV. I started teaching production design because there is an overlap between architecture, interior design, and production design. Movie sets don't come from a lot of famous film designers have interior and architecture degrees. So it's kind of like a melding of things I love. I love to teach it. So I went to school and I was like, I need a PhD. I need to come back. Not even for the PhD. Maybe just a different degree. I just want to be back in school. And after the first day of class, the first day of orientation, I spoke to the staff and everything. I went home to my sister. I said, "Oh my God, I totally found the place I belong. This is so great." Like it felt like I was coming home to something that I love. And then after the first day of class, she picked me up and I said, "Oh yeah, it's not the same. I am an outsider. I am not their friends. I'm going to have to give them a grade."
Right. This
I,
isn't me and all my colleagues striving to do good. This is me having to tell you,
yes.
you did phone it in, sweetie, and I can't
And
pass
I
you.
was so scared. I was like, oh, right after class, all of them grouped together, the friends, and they're all chatting. And then you're like, ooh, yeah, no, I'm not in the in crowd. No, no, I'm a teacher
No,
now.
they didn't invite you over.
It's time to change the role.
But to the point of Shannon, I feel like Shannon does that. I've only witnessed her a dozen or so times, but I feel like she does that line pretty good
Yes.
of teacher and
No,
friend.
not at
Am I
all.
mistaken? Like I
Mhm.
feel
And
that's
I
what comes through to me, that she's not going to sugarcoat it and she's not going to not have high expectations, but I feel like she creates
She
friendships
does,
with
and I
her
think it comes
students,
from respect.
right?
Like we respect for her,
Yeah.
we respect that she is going to be honest, and that's the most you can ask
Yeah.
for. And ever since I left, she and I are
Mhm.
Instagram friends, and she loves you too. Like it's her love of her life, and for my anniversary, we got to go see you too, and we couldn't stop chatting about it. She's just, she loves it. But, she wasn't my friend when I was her student. She became my friend after I'm
Right,
done with her
right, right, right.
class. And I just had a lot of
Right, this is
admiration
true.
for, you
Yeah.
know, all the teachers out there who go to bat for their
Yeah.
students and write those letter of recommendations, because that is so much time, and I admire them
Oh
so
my
much. Yeah.
goodness, right? Yeah. Oh my goodness. So here's the thing. I literally could keep asking you questions about this, but I do want to spend time on the type of design work that you do now. I mean, we have not had this conversation on the podcast before, the nuances of affordable housing design and your passion for it. So set the stage for that
Okay,
now,
so
Mona.
here I am. I am in San Francisco and I'm working for a firm that focuses on affordable housing. And my first project because it's still going right now, is a 98 unit senior housing in the inner Richmond area. And 20 units, I think, are dedicated to um, senior veterans and also formerly homeless veterans.
Mm,
And it's a building for people with
mm,
multiple and severe disabilities. So there's a lot of
mm,
support for the senior community in that area. And I was so fresh out of school. My boss said to me at the time, Yaku said, "Mono, why don't you do a study of the interior?" And I just went to town. I spent like 3 days not talking to anyone and designed all these crazy thoughts I had about how biophilia should come in and help this design. And I think it was like surprising everyone was like how much I was able to create in a short time. And I realized I was designing for my mother and my uncle and my dad and people that I'm designing for people who are really getting very old and not able to maybe find the fullest joy in life, and or maybe just beginning to have a roof over their head again. And I kept thinking about what does this really
Mm,
mean? And I think for the first time, that's what I was hunting. I was looking for, from film, I
mm,
was looking for this immediate impact that I knew when this building gets built, there's going to be 98 people or families in this building, and they're gonna get to experience
mm.
these decisions that we make today. Like almost the building insulation is 90% formaldehyde free. Like we're we're picking products that have no phthalates and no, and these were all sustainability things that I was very much influenced when I was a student, and I went on to keep studying. I am lead AP. I'm also a well AP, and I do Living Future, and I I just really believe that the population that we're designing for, sometimes the supportive housing portion of an affordable housing, a lot of affordable housing have a supportive housing section to it, like 10 units are dedicated or something. And I
Mhm.
realize that when you don't have a roof over your head, and actually, before I say that, let me back up 1 second. Of all the things I would have wanted to design, I never ever thought I would go into affordable housing. I I couldn't imagine it.
Right,
It
right.
it was like me going back to where I was, and I had struggled so far to forget that girl who didn't have a place to sleep and was picking food out of a trash can, and my first night homeless, a very big black man came up to me, and I was so scared of him. And he said, "Is that all you've got to sleep in tonight?" And I just had my clothes on my back.
Oh.
And he says, "You're going to freeze. I know it doesn't seem cold, but you're going to freeze." And then he gave me a bunch of newspapers. And I was like, "What is this for?" And he says, "It's called insulation."
He's
You
like,
know,
"That's your blanket.
yeah.
That's
So
your
he's,
blanket,
and I was like,
sweetie."
"What does that mean?" And he says, just shove it in your shirt. Just shove yourself with all that newspaper. And so I did. And that's how I slept the first night out on the streets. I didn't, yeah, right?
How about
Amazing. And
him?
I I
Right?
learned very quickly that there are people out there who would help you if you, and there are people to avoid.
Mm,
But because of that, I
right.
couldn't imagine doing a job. I mean, my internship at NICET, I interned at Avro Co. I interned at Perkins Eastman. I interned at Ramza, Robert A.M. Stern Architects. We were designing the most
Mm,
expensive apartments, in the country. And then I got to affordable housing where materials are spare, but very selected, and the population of the people that I'm designing for. And I realize now it's like the mirror that I'm looking at, that I'm afraid to look at, is not really a mirror. It's more of like a window to a memory, almost, of like, this happened to me. And
mm,
there are opportunities that we can help give so someone else can get out too. And I started to think more and more in that direction. And as we did community meetings, and people come to the meetings and they'll ask like, um, "Is there going to be hot water in every unit?" And then you're just like,
oh,
like, "I'm in a
oh,
wheelchair. Can I get to the bathtub? Am I going to be able to get a shower?"
oh,
The questions are also
yeah.
unique, and
And they're so literally tied to surviving. Like, nothing is
yeah,
taken for granted. To think you have to ask, would there be hot water? Obviously,
yeah.
you've done many days, weeks, nights
Yeah.
without it.
Will I
So
have a
it's not a given,
stove?
right?
Is there a refrigerator? Will I have a
Mm,
freezer? The questions were all very basic, and you realize that the people who are hoping to come live here are looking for the basic things, and they actually don't know to ask those bigger questions. And when I say bigger, I don't mean bigger in life needs, but bigger as in like, what is the construction material of this building?
Yes. Are you putting me in an environment that's going to off gas and you giving me the cheapest stuff? So therefore it's going to impact my health. Like they're like,
Yes,
I'll take one roof, please, and one refrigerator and one
yes,
bathtub. I'm good. Right. And so you're tapping into that, making sure that the things that would never occur to them to ask for
yes.
are
And that,
part of that.
they're going to get a
Interesting.
building that's healthy, and that through that healthiness of the building, that maybe their mind will get cleared up and they'll feel safety, and give them that,
Mm,
I couldn't have gotten where I was if I didn't meet that one family that let me sleep on their floor and I felt safe. The minute I felt safe, I was able to go out and shower. And the first thing I did was I went to look for a job. And no, I went out and I got minimum wage job, and I worked at a place called Chicken Delight on Hollywood Boulevard, and I fried chicken. And I just I did whatever I could, but I couldn't have done that if I smelled horrible and I had no place to put my head,
yes,
and I couldn't convince anyone that I was
that's
going to be a
right.
great hire when
That you'd show
yeah,
up the next day,
exactly. The
that you were worth the
stability of
shot.
having a roof over your head gives you the opportunity to have the stability to get the job, and then the stability to save money and
Mhm.
get yourself out. And I think it all comes from first that safety, a place for them to have a home. And as our job as designers, I mean, there is no greater reward than to know that everything that you're focusing on, and you're spending the time to check between two products, or you're deciding between materials. There is no greater joy than that when you do it, it's going to get built and it's going to help a lot of people. And I love that.
Mm,
I cannot imagine. I
amazing.
told you I started my little firm and I started doing small jobs, and all I could think about is how do I get a big job? Because I still want to do affordable housing, but I'm just not there yet. And I will one day.
Yes. Yeah, it's so incredible because, like, your line of looking in the mirror, right? Like, and now it's looking in a window rather than a mirror. Um, how much more you could meet another designer that has compassion, that has empathy, that has a desire to serve this community. But how much more you bring to it when you're literally designing, imagining yourself, imagining your mother, imagining your uncle, like you said, like what really is important. Because yes, the focus groups and the community meetings, but I think that I could see somebody that had a simple desire to do well, which is, by the way,
Yes,
admirable. Like lots, you know what I mean? Um, but hearing that question and maybe being like, that's silly. Of course there's a stove. That's silly. Of course there's, but not that they would respond that way, but not taking to heart the depth of what it means to not make an assumption that there's going to be much more than a roof and that these other things shouldn't be taken for granted. And I just think that um, it just must impact the way you do this at such a level that brings so much more meaning to the end product, and not just to you and the value of you to the firm that you're working with, but to that end
absolutely.
product.
The reward, the feeling of like, and I'm not a saint, I'm everyone, I
No,
get
you're
paid.
human,
It's
right?
not, I'm not a
Yeah.
nonprofit. I get paid. I
Yes.
take the bill and I take the money and I try to take care of the people I love. But at the same time, like
Right.
to be able to wake up every day and know that if today's going to go a little longer, it's going to be okay because it's it's going to help someone else. It's going to help the people that could have been me. And I think it's really hard when you go to speak at some of these places, and sometimes there's a lot of um, fear, and they don't want an affordable housing built near them because they don't understand what affordable housing
Mm-hmm.
is. Like almost all people in
Mm-hmm.
affordable housing are through referrals. They are already working with a social worker and are already working to get themselves back on their
Mm,
feet so they can be eligible for opportunities like this. So it's not a free for all. It's not like
mhm,
anyone can come live in an affordable housing. You go through an entire process, and only a small portion of the units are given through lottery. There's priorities to age, priorities to people who already live in the same community but got forced out because they couldn't afford to live there anymore. And
mm,
most affordable housing is seniors. It's that whatever they saved
mm.
back, in the 80s when people didn't realize how long they were going to live, and there are
Right,
people
right,
now who are
right,
80 or 90 who retired at 65 and completely have no way to support themselves because everyone they loved, they've
right.
outlived. And and now they're on the streets.
Yeah, and if you don't have the
Hmm.
family network, right? Like, I think about my dad, he passed away 5 years ago, but he would
Yeah.
have been in that boat,
Hmm.
except that he lived with my brother, right? And so together, him and my brother and his wife and his child, they like it was the combining of the incomes, right? But if my dad had to do it on his own, he would have needed like an
Yeah.
affordable housing type thing. Regular guy, just had his own businesses his entire life. Just nobody ever said, "Hey, start a mutual fund." Like nobody said that to him back like in 1950. You know what I mean? Like, and he was self-employed, so there's no
Yeah.
pension. And it's like, and he always just lived
Yeah.
hand to mouth,
Hmm.
so there was no savings either.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean?
It's
And
prime
it's
example.
just like, all I'm saying is it doesn't always have to come from bad circumstances. It can just
Yeah.
be, to your point, the circumstances of
Sure.
where you're at,
I work in
right?
San Jose a lot, and in San Jose, the population of African Americans in San Jose is only like 4% now, I think, around there. But 50% of the people who are homeless in San
Mm.
Jose are almost 50% is African American. There's no
See,
community
that's
to
it's
support
insane.
them, and so it falls, and it's a mirror to every big city that's going it's not going to stop at the big city. You could be in a rural city and then you see some aunt, or a mother of someone who had gone to grief because they lost their children and now they've lost their home. I think everyone is only a few paychecks from losing everything, and if we can't find the empathy and see that, we really are cruel.
Yeah.
Like, and I'm
Yeah.
not saying everyone
Yeah.
is deserving of every opportunity. I'm not saying that, right?
No, 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 no. But I mean, a statistic like that, that's like, how do you run a city and ignore a
Right.
statistic like that? That's just, to me, like, the only thing I can hear in my head is stunad. That's
Yeah.
stunad. I'm sorry. You know what I mean? It's like 4% of the population is from a specific culture. So in this case, you're saying African
Yeah.
American, but it could be anything. But 50% of the population at need in that city
Yeah.
is from that 1-4%. Like, I'm sorry. Like, no, that's illogical. That is the people running the
They
community
are working so
ignoring what's in front
hard,
of their
and
eyes.
within their own community. My firm is working on the African American cultural center for San Jose, and they're raising money
Mm,
for it right now. And it is a
good.
cultural center, but it is a affordable housing component. And the cultural center portion, there's
Mm,
going to be a clinic, there's going to be mental services, healthcare, supportive.
wow.
There's going to be a theater to celebrate each other,
Mm,
and a small
yeah.
museum. There's all these aspirations, and so
Yeah, because you gotta get the hope going and the opportunities for enjoyment so that you can aspire to
yeah.
do the next thing, right? I mean, whatever that next thing is, even if it's just going,
And
waking
my
up the next day,
and my
right?
job
Like,
at this project
why?
was really different. I didn't have to do design, but they told me that they needed someone to kind of interview the community and come up with like a proposal for all of these stakeholders. Like, how are they going to share the space? Like the museum person, how much space does he need? The theater person, what do they need?
Mm,
The clinic portion, what do they need? And so I surveyed and I interviewed local they're like local heroes to their community, throughout, and talked to them. And what I
yeah.
learned is that when they're from that community, almost all of them, they're not implants. They're people that grew up in San Jose, spent
Yeah.
generations, and have been
And they
forced out
wanted
of their
better.
homes or
Right.
not doing well.
Oh,
And I was just like saying that, when there's opposition, I was like, you're not opposing aliens. You're opposing people that probably grew up with your grandparents and they were okay that back then.
mm,
So I don't know. I
yes.
I know that it's a difficult subject, but before saying no, I think we have to think about what does it really mean and do ourselves an opportunity to really learn about it and get educated about it and see what it means to not do anything. Because it's either we do it or we don't,
Mm,
right? If you put in affordable
that's right.
housing in the middle of nowhere because you think that's where they belong, or you think that that's safer for you because you're so far away, that's no different than what we did in the 50s or whatever, right? We the 30s when we had the New Deal,
Right.
we pushed a group of people which are now made up of every color. And there are whites, there are Hispanics, there are Asian, there are blacks, there are everything,
Yes.
and you put them out there with no resources around them to grow from. There's no job opportunities, there's no transportation to get them to places, there's not enough grocery stores, there's not enough after school opportunities, there's no nurseries. All of this comes back to like the only way to help people up, it's almost like they need the network to help them.
Yes. You need the village. You need the village. I mean, and the thing is, you can't pat yourself on the back that you built a building and then plopped them in the middle of nowhere and didn't give all of those support services, like you said, because it's about
Yeah.
building a life, right? It's like giving somebody an opportunity to build their life and then for them to build the next generation of their
Yes.
family's
I think
lives,
policy is next
right?
for me, somewhere down the line. I know.
Yeah.
Somewhere
Yeah,
down the
I
line,
know,
I got to
right?
get into
Right?
policy.
You Oh, I can see it too. I can see it too. You're going to need a couple of lifetimes on this planet, Mona, because you have a lot to do
Thank you,
for us.
Anne.
I'm pretty
Thank
sure
you.
of it. Yes, you are a heck of a lady, I have to
Thank you.
tell you.
I want to do so much.
And with yeah, I just it, it's funny because I knew I liked you the day I met you in that Zoom. And then it was confirmed when you were in the Luann live Zoom. And it's just so much more than that, what I imagined or thought. I just thought you were what I appreciated in you and what I saw in you was, I'll say, your earnestness and your seriousness, your commitment to what I thought at that point was simply your design education, right? Like that's what I saw. I'm like, that's a serious one right there. That one's going to go places. That's what's good. Like I saw that and I tend to see that in somebody, right? But my God, talk about peeling back the onion
And
here.
you know, it's funny also that I've met so many other people, and God, all the stories are different. Like I teach now, and I have
Yeah.
students who are like in the military who are coming back and trying to get their education. And our stories are all unique and we all take a different path to get to where we are. But if we can just like take a moment to like celebrate, the my sister once said something to me really wise. I was going to adult school and I was like, I'm in junior college now, and I said, I don't know, but nobody understands me. I will never be able to find a single friend here because no one's gone through what I've gone through. And my sister just looked at me and she says, if you're so focused on the difference, you'll never see the similarities. And it
Oh, wow.
changed my entire career. And no matter where I went from there on, my sister is like this angel on my shoulder. And my sister always said, I always hear
Oh,
her when I start to go down this path where we are so different. There's no way. And I'm like, we're not. We're not really that different. I just need to figure out where we
right.
can connect and build that bridge,
Yeah.
so
Right. Just like, like the unlikeliness of there you are, this young girl, and that gentleman that's like, here's
yeah,
the newspapers, right? It's like, in your first moment, it feels like we are nowhere near the same. Like, nope, what are you doing? Like, right? Like, this is scary. I'm on the street. And it didn't matter his color. It's
yeah,
just an older guy, right? Like, I mean, it's not, it's just you're a young woman on the street. But here it is. It's like that moment of, no, here's what's the same about us. We're both on the
yeah,
street and it's going to be cold. And I got
yeah,
newspaper and you
absolutely.
need it. I love it. I love it. So here's the thing. I say this often, but you know what? I really could talk to you for another 3 hours, but I'm going to, close it out. But I do want to just say, actually ask you, since we've had so few conversations, none on the show, about designers who specialize in affordable housing, in case you hit a nerve with anybody that's like, oh, that feels like me, I would love to get into that. Is it simply a Google search of the companies in the US that specialize in this? Like, how would somebody look into that if what everything you said feels like that's what I want to wake up in the morning and do? I want to work in that
I would
end of
say
the
the very
industry.
first step, a lot of these designers show up at those community meetings in your neighborhood. They all show up. They
Ah,
either one person who works at some
okay.
firm or they're an architect who are a client is that's their potential future client and they've attended the event. I think that you should go there and start there. Every community throughout the United States, I truly believe there is some organization in the neighborhood that is raising money or working with different design groups to try to get affordable housing to be built. Um, and then when you get there, figure out who designed it, who's the architect and who's the interior, and then
Yeah.
go and talk to them and say, this is a passion of mine. I mean, I did not go anywhere during that path, but if I were to, that's what I would do.
Right, because if you're just starting out, and that's such good advice because of course we can do the other route. Like, oh, I see a sign. That's an affordable housing project. Go up. Let me see who the architect and the design firm is. I didn't even think about that when I asked you, by the way. Hello. And I was like, oh yeah. They usually have that sign outside. But the thing is by going, if this is a passion or, Mona has lit the passion, going to the meetings is just more of that passion, of more of that learning and more of that experience, and then coming face to face with the people who
Mhm.
are doing it,
Yeah.
boots on the ground,
I
right? That are
always tell
doing it. I
people
love it.
like I heard this at ASID the year that I had won the portfolio competition, and it was Jennifer was a speaker, and she said something, "Go where you are rare." It was something. It was during her speech, and I thought,
Mm,
when you go to that community meeting, you might be really rare in a sense where there's not many people showing up and wanting to get involved. But more importantly, you're bringing information about the community, the knowledge that you already have of that community, and that can really contribute to the design of that community because there's a lot of designers, the firms that design in communities they don't live in because they do affordable housing throughout the
mm,
United States and maybe they have projects. And there's
mm,
also different architecture firms that do 100% remote. Um, I think interiors, we come in a little bit later. We always, so aligning ourselves
mhm.
with the firm that do affordable housing and trying to get to the point where we can maybe do a sister, project together where we handle the interiors and then they do the architecture is a great way. Um, I think I'm not at
Mhm.
the level to make these introductions or anything, but someday, president.
Keep her number because this lady is not done. I'm telling you right now.
And talking about lottery and talking about luck, I think the reason I'm here is because I won that lottery. I listen into your podcast when I can, and
Oh,
you were
right, on the,
premiering your show.
was it for
Yes,
the
you were so
docuseries?
I was so excited to
Yes.
watch your docuseries and I chimed in, I joined in and I was watching it and then you announced that, you're gonna do a lottery for some gifts and I was like, oh, I'm in the car and I was like, I'm just gonna keep listening and I was so entertained. And then you said my name or the person who said my name and I was like, what? And I was like, what?
Oh my god. Oh my god. I forgot about that other connection that we had. That was just like, wait a minute.
And I got a care
Mona,
package.
it's you again, right?
I got a great care package,
Yes,
and
yes.
yeah,
Oh, that's so right. I remember that now. You got the
yes.
wellness package. of all
And
people.
I loved it. I just felt like some things are just meant to be, you know. If I hadn't joined that day and if I
Oh,
hadn't won, maybe I wouldn't have come on to the call and talked to you and who knows, you know?
yeah. Oh my God, that's right. Oh, that's so crazy. I forgot about that. I was making the connection to the virtual Luann Live, but I forgot that I was also visualizing the same, coming on the call for that too. I was mixing them in my mind as one
Yeah.
event.
Well,
Well, we were just meant to cross paths. That's really what just we're just saying is
we
the
will
point.
cross paths again, I think.
Yeah. Oh, I'm sure of it. I'm sure of it because you are one very special lady.
Yeah.
You really are. And I'm so grateful that the podcast brought us together. It's been my honor to understand and know more about you. You are just one heck of an
Oh,
inspiring
thank
lady,
you.
Mona.
Well,
You really
you
are. Thank
inspire a
you.
whole nation of designers and business women. And you have, you know, what I'm always impressed about is every time when I hear someone who tells me or they've listened to your podcast and they've like tripled their earnings and you know and I'm always like what would Luann talk to me about? I don't make any money. I don't really bring money to anyone. You know? Like I'm just paying student loans and getting by.
Trying to decide if I should take more loans to get a PhD.
I will go into retirement with student loans at this point. But I love it.
They're like your shoes and your bags.
And I could never stop, I don't think. I think I will be 80 years old and I will
No, and
still
you
try to
shouldn't.
take a class on, history of hip hop or something that
Yes.
I know nothing about.
And it's funny that you say that because I remember when I was younger, I was at it was an appointment for window treatments at Window Works, and this has got to be going back 25 years ago, and I was in a shop at home appointment with somebody who explained to me that they were an adjunct professor over at Drew University here in Madison, New Jersey. And, and the thing is, I have to say, when you don't have the education, you are always attracted to it. Like there is that part of you, right? And so now I'm very settled in, I don't need the actual degree to prove to myself. But at that point, like, I mean, that's only in the last 5 or 6 years. And I'm like, you know what? You can do it. However, it doesn't mean that the desire to learn is gone for sure. Like I'm like, Vinny's always like, what's your bucket list? I'm like, well, we have to walk the Camino. I have to see the pyramids. I have to see Israel. I said, and I have to learn the piano and I'm going to have to finally learn French all the way. And he's just like, what are you talking about? Right. Like, and that's just like the list off the top of my head. There's 20 other things. But the point was, something came because of course I'm like grilling him on, oh, is it really cool there? You a teacher there? What is it like? Blah, blah, blah. And all of a sudden he told me that when you are a senior citizen, if there is a university in your town, you can audit the classes at no charge. And of course, back then when I've got 4 kids and 90 colleges that we're paying for and that was like, oh my God, no charge. I could do this for free. And so literally in the back of my mind, I'm always like, okay, well, I'm eventually just going to sit in every class in college and just learn it all, like, but not having to do it in the confines of the path of the degree. It's like, oh, I'm interested in marketing. Oh, I'm interested in French. Or I'm interested in this. You know what I mean? So I'm with you. I'm with you. You and I will go to classes together when we're old and gray.
I think it's a gift to be able to learn, and if you go
Yeah.
into every endeavor in your life and just see it as a gift or an opportunity, there's so much to learn. Like the class I want to take from you the most is your financing classes. I have no idea how
Oh,
to do
so
my own
good too.
financings. It's so hard. And you know what?
You got to
I
take them. You
I
got to
will.
take the online bookkeeping 101 and
Mhm.
Peter's, the strategizing
You're
your
gonna see
finances.
me
You have
soon.
to. I mean, and the thing is, look, it is literally like we're here both big fans of formal education and formal universities and what they bring to us and the amazing people like Ellen and Shannon that they put in front of us and yourself now. But they're not
No.
teaching this in the design school. Like Luann University is literally what you don't get there. And Ellen and I went round and around on this one time, and it was on air a little bit on air, and then since then we've talked many times. I love her. I love her. I went to her class one time, right? And I was like, I don't get it. What's the deal? Why can't you? She schooled me. She's like, Lou Ann Nigara, sit down and let me tell you what we have to prepare interior designers for in just their profession to get them out the door in 4 years. And to her credit, she said, I'm consistently educating the designers that come through NICED, like, you got to do something about the business part. You either got to work for somebody or you got to take courses on the side or you got to come back and do our CEUs, and of course I'm like, well, just send them to Luann University. We
It's
got you
great.
covered.
I hear about how you guys do your finances, and it's such an important part. Like everything
Yeah.
we do in our
Yeah.
life comes back to finding that balance that we can support ourselves to be able to do what we want to do, right?
We have to put our mask on first, right? You got to, that's what I tell the designers. I'm like, you have to be profitable so you can keep bringing your gifts to the
Yes.
rest of us. Like, you have to. You can't fizzle out because you just didn't learn how to do your finance. I mean, that's the
Yeah,
travesty, right? If you have the desire, the passion, the skills, and the talent, and you just can't sustain it because you don't know that part of it. Like, you can't know everything, you just can't, and that's okay, right? It's just, but knowing you have a gap and not addressing it, that part's
right,
not okay,
right.
right? That part's not okay. So, oh my goodness. Well, I appreciate you so much, Mona. Thank you so much for
Thank
being here
you. Thank you for
today.
having me. And I had only one thought to say. I was thinking about, what I would want to say to students who haven't graduated yet,
Oh, okay.
because
Share.
I've
Please share.
only been a few years
Good
out,
point.
but, you know, take those opportunities. I was very lucky and I worked really hard and I won a few scholarships before I graduated, but I did not win all the things I applied for. I mean, I applied for like over 15 scholarships and I won four. So it means I lost 11, and that means, or more, 13 I might have done. I lost a lot. And, but every single time I applied for something else, it made me look deeper into who I was because I had to answer questions or prompts and think about design in a way of like, what am I trying to do with my work and my life? But I also think that if I hadn't applied to any of it, if fear had kept me from applying or fear of rejection or whatever else, I wouldn't have won. And I wouldn't have won on anything that would have given me a platform to have been on a presentation, a Zoom presentation and meet Luann. Like every small thing kind of leads to something else. So I guess my point is take it all in. Don't be afraid. Just go for it. And rejection from one thing is not a reflection of you. It's for whatever reason you didn't tick the box for that moment in that
Right.
moment of time, and don't let that be something that deters you from going after what you want.
I love that. Many, if they were aware that, in your final senior year or whatever it was, that you won 4 awards, would be like, oh my God. And by the way, oh my God. But I love that you had the vulnerability to share that you applied for
So
11,
I applied
right?
for
Was it 11 or
over
15?
15.
11.
So I lost at
Over
least
15.
11. So
Yeah.
I lost
You lost
yeah.
11, right? But I mean, it's like what is it? I don't know. I don't know the basketball players. Is it Kobe Johnson or is Michael Jordan? Whoever. It's like you miss 100% of the
Right.
shots you don't
Exactly.
take, right?
Exactly.
Like you miss 100% of the ones that you stand there and say, I shouldn't because fill in. I'm not good enough. I don't know enough. I didn't try it. I don't know enough to do whatever the nonsense in your head is. Um, and I love and the perseverance and the fortitude to apply for 15 scholarships, just like right there.
It's a
Like
lot.
that's
I have a whole
that's
folder
pretty
structure of
special.
like, rejected, rejected, rejected. I think about authors a lot, writers who write and oh my God, that
Right?
you gotta have thick
Oh,
skin.
right.
Or how many actors, when I was in film school, I remember one of my professors said, my boss saw my wife and thought she was really beautiful and said, I want you to cast the next lead actress in the story. Like write it like it's your wife. And then he came to the casting day and he just kind of like thought about his wife and created the mystery around the character based on his wife's looks and everything. And he said he came to the casting day and he saw like 15 women that looked like his wife. And he said, my wife's a beautiful, wonderful woman, and this room had 15 women that could be her sister. And and he said that the competition sometimes it's those little boxes that you tick, you know. It's the rejection
Yeah.
is real in every industry, and so we just got to be strong
Yes.
and persevere.
Yeah. Well, amen on that one. I mean, for you, you're the epitome of that girl.
Thank you for having me. Thank you for talking to me.
This has been awesome. This has been awesome. And if we're not careful, we're going to stop and start again. So I'm gonna. Oh, thank you,
I
sweetie.
hope
I
I get to
appreciate
see you in
you.
person soon.